I had always prided myself on my ability to find a good deal, so when I stumbled upon this apartment listing, I was thrilled. The rent was cheap, especially for the city, and the building, though old, had a certain charm to it. The added bonus of a small gym downstairs sealed the deal for me and my two roommates. We moved in quickly, excited about the new chapter in our lives. Our new home was a corner apartment on the 7th floor, which meant we only had two neighbors. One was an elderly couple with a friendly golden retriever. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were kind, always greeting us with warm smiles and the occasional baked goods. Their dog, Max, would wag his tail enthusiastically whenever he saw us. The other neighbor, however, remained a mystery. We knew she lived alone, but beyond that, we hadn't seen much of her. The first time I encountered anything related to this elusive neighbor was on a Monday morning. I was groggy, clutching my coffee thermos like a lifeline as I waited for the elevator. As the doors were about to close, a voice called out, "Hold the elevator, please." I quickly pressed the button, and a guy came jogging down the hall, slipping into the elevator just in time. "Thanks," he said, slightly out of breath. He was tall, with dark hair and an easy smile. "Are you new here?" "Yeah," I replied, trying to muster up some semblance of wakefulness. "Just moved in last week." "How do you like it so far?" he asked, his tone cheerful and conversational. "It's nice," I said, keeping my answers short. My brain was still foggy from sleep. He chuckled. "You remind me of my girlfriend, Amy. She's not a morning person either. Needs her coffee before she can function." I smiled weakly. "Yeah, mornings aren't really my thing." The elevator ride was brief, but in those few minutes, he managed to tell me all about Amy. He was clearly head over heels for her, and his excitement was infectious, even to my half-asleep self. He mentioned that he was planning something special for her birthday that weekend, and I found myself smiling despite my grogginess. We parted ways at the street, and I couldn't help but think about how nice it was to see someone so genuinely in love. It brightened my morning a bit, even if I was still mostly asleep. Over the next couple of days, the routine of work and settling into the new apartment kept me busy. I didn't see the guy again, but his enthusiastic chatter about Amy stuck with me. It was a Wednesday evening when I finally met Amy. I had just finished a long day at work and was looking forward to a quiet night in. As I stepped into the elevator, a girl hurried in behind me. She was in her mid-20s, with disheveled hair and a look of sheer panic on her face. I took out my headphones and asked, "Hey, are you okay?" She glanced at the entrance of the building, her eyes wide with fear. "Yeah, it's been a rough day," she said, her voice trembling. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Something was definitely off. "What floor?" I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle. "7th, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. It was my floor too. As the elevator doors closed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. "I'm Alice, by the way," I said, hoping to put her at ease. "I live right next door." She forced a weak smile.
"I'm Amy."
"Nice to meet you." Amy. The name clicked in my mind, and I remembered the guy from Monday morning. "Oh, I met your boyfriend the other day," I said, trying to sound friendly. "He seems really nice." Amy's face turned ashen, and the little color that had returned to her cheeks drained away completely. "I don't have a boyfriend," she said, her voice shaky. I blinked, my mind racing to find a plausible explanation. Maybe a roommate then? Sorry, I didn't mean to assume." Amy shook her head vehemently. "I live alone. Who told you they were my boyfriend?" I explained the encounter in the elevator, describing the man and his enthusiastic chatter about her. Amy's eyes widened with horror as I spoke. "That's Dan," she said, her voice barely audible. "He's been stalking me for months." My heart sank. The cheerful guy from Monday was not what he seemed. Amy quickly filled me in on the details. Dan was her ex-boyfriend, and their relationship had ended badly. He had been stalking her ever since, showing up at her work, making phone calls, and now, apparently, he had figured out where she lived. "We need to go to the police," I said firmly. Amy nodded, and we headed to the nearest precinct together. Filing the police report was a frustrating experience. Despite Amy's detailed account of the harassment, the officers explained that without concrete evidence of a threat or physical harm, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested she get a restraining order, but Amy had already tried that, to no avail. We returned to the apartment with a heavy sense of defeat. Amy thanked me for my help, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear. She decided to stay with a friend for the rest of the week, just in case Dan showed up again. The weekend passed uneventfully, and I didn't see Dan again. Amy returned briefly to pack up her things and moved out the following week. The sense of relief was palpable, but it was tinged with a lingering unease. Dan had vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving behind a trail of anxiety and fear. Life in the apartment gradually returned to normal, but the experience left a lasting impression on me. I became more vigilant, always double-checking the locks and being wary of strangers. The building's charm had lost some of its luster, overshadowed by the unsettling encounter. Months passed, and the memory of Dan began to fade. New neighbors moved into Amy's old apartment, and the rhythms of daily life resumed. But every now and then, I would catch myself glancing over my shoulder, a reminder of the dark side of human nature lurking beneath the surface of everyday interactions. It was a reminder that even in the most seemingly idyllic settings, danger could be lurking just around the corner. And it made me cherish the bonds I had with my roommates and neighbors even more, knowing that in a world full of uncertainties, we had to look out for each other. As I settled into my life in the apartment, I couldn't help but think about Amy from time to time. I hoped she had found a safe place to live, free from the shadows of her past. Her story served as a sobering reminder that while we may not always be able to control the actions of others, we could stand together, support one another, and create a community where everyone felt safe and valued. And that, in itself, was a beacon of hope in an often unpredictable world. When I was around 10 years old, I played football on a local team. We had our practices at a field not far from where I lived, a short bike ride away. Being one of the few girls on the team, I always felt a little proud of my place among the boys, proving that I could keep up with them. My friend, Emily, who lived nearby, was on the same team, and we often rode our bikes to practice together. Our route was straightforward, mostly along a long walking track that used to be old train tracks. The tracks had been replaced by a smooth cement path, popular among dog walkers and joggers. The track was lined with houses, giving it a sense of safety, even though some parts had small woods. At night, it was well lit by strong lamps, allowing you to see a good 50 meters ahead. It was on one such night, at almost 8 p.m., that Emily and I found ourselves riding home from practice, laughing and joking about something I can't quite remember now. The air was crisp, with the faint smell of fallen leaves, signaling the approach of autumn. We were about to turn off the sidewalk and onto the long walking track when we saw him. A man coming from the direction we were heading. He walked slowly, almost deliberately, and there was something unsettling about the way he moved. His eyes were wide, almost too wide, and as we got closer, he stopped and stared at us. We had to dismount our bikes because the track started with a slight uphill, and it was safer to walk up than to try and pedal. He stood there, blocking our way, and a heavy silence fell between us. Emily and I exchanged a glance, our earlier mirth evaporating. The man's gaze followed us, his eyes never leaving us, and as we passed him, I felt a shiver run down my spine. His presence was eerie, and I could almost feel the weight of his stare on my back. We quickened our pace, mounting our bikes as soon as we cleared the small incline. I dared a glance back and saw him turn around, now facing the same direction we were headed. He began to walk, then pick up his pace. My heart raced, an uneasy feeling gnawing at me. Emily must have felt the same because she whispered urgently, "Let's go faster." We pedaled harder, the familiar rhythm of our bikes now tinged with urgency. Another glance back, and my unease turned to fear. The man was no longer walking. He was half running, half lurching towards us, his eyes locked on us with an intensity that chilled me to the bone. "Faster!" Emily shouted, and we took off. She was ahead of me, her legs pumping furiously, while I struggled to keep up. Fear surged through me, adrenaline giving me a burst of speed. But I couldn't resist looking back one more time. He was closer, his long legs eating up the distance between us. He moved with a frenzied determination, and it was clear he was aiming directly for me. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I felt tears of fear pricking at my eyes. Emily kept yelling, urging me to go faster, but I was already pushing myself to the limit. Just when I thought I couldn't go any faster, we saw two older women walking towards us from a side path. Relief flooded through me, and we finally dared to stop. We turned around to find the man had disappeared, having thrown himself into the woods. Emily and I collapsed into each other, crying from the sheer terror of the experience. As we caught our breath, Emily told me between sobs that the man had been inches away from grabbing my bike. The thought of what might have happened if he had succeeded sent another shiver down my spine. It was a chilling realization that he had likely intended to drag one of us into the woods. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling of how close we came to something truly horrific that night. After we calmed down a bit, we rode the rest of the way home in silence, our earlier laughter and jokes a distant memory. The night that had begun so ordinarily had turned into a nightmare, one that would linger in our minds for years to come. The sense of safety we had once felt on that familiar path was shattered, replaced by a lingering wariness each time we took the route again. The next day, we told our parents about the encounter. They were understandably alarmed and reported the incident to the local authorities. However, without a clear description or any other witnesses, there was little they could do. The man remained a phantom in the woods, a dark figure haunting the edges of our memories. Life went on, but the experience left a mark on us. We were more cautious, more aware of our surroundings. The carefree rides to and from practice were never quite the same. Emily and I grew closer through our shared fear, finding solace in each other's company. We never saw the man again, but the memory of that night lingered, a reminder of how quickly ordinary life could turn into a nightmare. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind that makes the air feel fresh and full of possibilities. The leaves were starting to turn golden and red, creating a beautiful mosaic against the clear blue sky. I was 11 years old, just a kid trying to navigate the newness of a different school with my two younger brothers, Max and Charlie. We had recently moved to this town, and though the change was exciting, it was also daunting. Our school routine was split between Mom dropping us off 3 days a week and catching the bus the other 2. That particular day, Mom was running late for work, so she had no choice but to drop us off at the front gate. despite my pleas to be let off around the back. As she pulled up to the curb, I spotted a man standing ominously at the only entrance to the school. He was tall, around 6 feet, with dark brown hair and a full sleeve of tattoos down his right arm. He wore a black, skin-tight t-shirt and camouflage shorts that seemed out of place against the backdrop of elementary school students. The sight of him immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Maybe it was the way he stood there, a little too still, or the way his eyes scanned the students with a cold, unsettling detachment. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew something was wrong. I turned to Mom, trying one last time to get her to drop us off elsewhere. "Mom, please, can't you let us off at the back today?" She glanced at the clock on the dashboard, impatience and worry creasing her forehead. "I'm sorry, sweetie, but I'm really late for work. You'll be fine. Just go straight in, okay?" With that, she drove off, leaving us standing there, exposed. I looked at my brothers, who were 9 and 6, their innocent faces trusting me completely. "Guys, listen to me carefully," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to walk quickly and stay together. Follow me and don't say a word, okay?" They nodded, their eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and trust. I positioned myself between them and the man, my heart pounding in my chest as we approached the gate. I made sure to get a good look at him, noting every detail. As we got closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In his hand, hidden from casual view, he was flicking a pocket knife in and out, the blade catching the sunlight in a way that sent a chill down my spine. My mind raced. The primary objective was to get my brothers somewhere safe. I urged them forward, picking up our pace as we headed towards the library. "Go in and stay there until I come back," I instructed them firmly. They obeyed without question, sensing the urgency in my voice. Once they were safely inside, I made my way to the office, cutting through the staff room to avoid the front entrance. My teacher, Mrs. Muddle, a kind woman with a perpetually concerned expression, saw me and started to guide me back towards the front. "What are you doing here, Sarah? You should be in class," she said. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice trembling but determined. "There's a man at the front gate with a knife. We need to call the police." She hesitated for a moment, then saw the seriousness in my eyes. Without another word, she let me through. I burst into the office, startling the receptionist, Mrs. Green. "There's a man outside with a knife," I blurted out. "He's dangerous. We need help." Mrs. Green's eyes widened in alarm, and she immediately picked up the phone to call the cops. The minutes that followed felt like an eternity. The police arrived quickly, their presence a welcome sight as they apprehended the man and escorted him away in handcuffs. Later that day, during lunchtime, I was summoned to the principal's office. My heart sank, assuming I was in trouble. I had a knack for getting into mischief, and I figured this was just another instance. But before I could even open my mouth to defend myself, a woman I didn't recognize pulled me into a tight hug. She was crying, tears streaming down her face as she kept repeating, "Thank you. Thank you for saving my son's life." It turned out the man at the gate was the father of one of my classmates. He had been abusive towards both his wife and child, and after his wife left him, taking their son with her, he had become unhinged. His plan that day was to kidnap and kill his own son, believing that if he couldn't have him, no one could. As I listened to her story, a mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, fear, pride, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude that my brothers and I were safe. The school administration praised my quick thinking and bravery, but all I could think about was how close we had come to tragedy. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to normal. My brothers and I settled into our routines, the memory of that morning gradually fading into the background. But the experience had changed me. It had opened my eyes to the darker side of the world, a side that I hadn't been fully aware of before. It taught me the importance of vigilance and the power of intuition. The school installed additional security measures, including a second gate and more staff on duty during drop-off and pick-up times. Parents were more cautious, often walking their children all the way to the classroom doors. The incident had left an indelible mark on our small community, a stark reminder of the fragility of our safety. Years later, as I looked back on that day, I realized how pivotal it had been in shaping who I became. It instilled in me a sense of responsibility and a deep-seated instinct to protect those I cared about. I never forgot the look of gratitude in that mother's eyes, a look that told me I had made a real difference. The world is full of unpredictable events and hidden dangers, but it's also full of moments of courage and acts of kindness. That day, I learned that even in the face of fear, we have the power to act, to make choices that can alter the course of events. And sometimes, it's the seemingly small actions, like walking my brothers to the library, that can have the biggest impact. Life continued, and so did I, carrying with me the lessons learned from that fateful day. It wasn't just about the bravery or the quick thinking. It was about understanding the weight of our actions and the ripple effects they can have on others. And as I moved forward, I did so with a heart a little wiser, a little more aware, and forever grateful for the safety and love that surrounded me.